board. Oh my goodness, I am very excited for today's conversation. It has been just a long time coming in my heart. It feels like, even though we've only been planning this for like a month, but I've just been like waiting and waiting. So we have two guests with us today. We have Claudia Lifton and also Gwenna Hunter. Claudia is based in Colorado, as well as myself, and Gwenna is based in California. We are going to be talking today about the connection between animal rights and human rights, social justice, as well as clearing up some misinformation here, some very common misconceptions, and then how veganism applies to all of this. I am vegan, and all three of us are. And that being said, my goal with this whole podcast series is to always lead from a place of empathy and respect and compassion, because we know that listeners are going to be joining from all over the place and with all different kinds of backgrounds, and shame-based tactics are never a healthy motivator, but I do think that it is so important to get some good, honest education out there. So all that to say, thank you both so much for joining today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's start by having each of you tell us a little bit about yourselves. I gave our listeners a very brief introduction to you both, but if you want to just tell a little bit about who you are, what you're passionate about, and who are some of the beloved people in your life. And we're going to get a little bit more into your your actual work later in the interview. But whoever wants to jump in, go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Gwenna, I'm gonna let you start us off.
All right, so obviously I'm Gwenna Hunter. I'm the founder of Vegans of LA, stands for Los Angeles. And I have a community organization that is really just now becoming official, but I started back in 2015 just as a way to meet other vegans. I wasn't vegan yet. Honestly, I was vegetarian. And Vegetarians of LA didn't sound that nice. So I'm like, oh, Vegans of LA it is. And I ended up, I would say a year later, and I was vegetarian just for what I felt were health reasons, had nothing to do with animals. And in 2016, I had a dream that I was like flying in the sky. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead of your questions or not. If I am, okay.
No, go for it.
Yeah, in the dream, I was flying in the sky, and I saw this really beautiful cow in a green pasture. And when I looked at the cow looked at me, and then we merged and became one. And I was the cow, and I possessed all of the cow's consciousness, feelings. Like I embodied the cow, and I just possessed all memories, feelings, emotions. And as I woke up from the dream, I was like crying, because I was like, oh my God, cows love? Because that was the most profound feeling that I received, was like their spirit, like their capacity to love, which was purer than a human's, in my opinion. And I'm just like crying. I'm just like, what? And we eat them. And even though I wasn't eating cows, I didn't care if anyone else did. And fast forward just a few, maybe 2 or 3 days later, I'm on Facebook, and I'm still contemplating, like, cows love, so pigs gotta love, chickens must love, turkeys must love. And my mind is like, just like, shh. And I see this video called Dairy is Effing Scary by Aaron Janis. 5 minutes of just total, like, knock you down with the truth. And I'm looking at that, and I'm like, wait a minute, they're conscious, and this is how we get their milk? Because I was, 2016 is when I learned that cows are pregnant for 9 months. I never knew that. And so I'm relating to her as a woman, not as a animal. And I'm a woman. I'm like, this is a woman. She carries her baby for 9 months. Look what we do to her breast, how we, take the milk. Look what we do to her body, how we get them, impregnate them. We take her sons and make her son a veal. We take her daughter and give her the same life. And I'm just like I saw the exact same blueprint. Like the slavery blueprint was so, there was no barrier or no, I just completely saw what I saw as a human being.
Wow.
And so from that point, I was just like, I knew I was destined to work in this movement. And I said, I just got to tell everybody. If I just tell people, they'll go vegan, So I was like, I won't, I use the term crazy. I'm just gonna say super passionate vegan, where I was posting slaughter videos like all day. And I'm like, this has to stop. Like, I was just doing that because I thought that if people saw, they would be like, oh, I get it. I'll stop. But I realized that that's not how it works. And so
Mm.
ever since then, I've been moving in different ways of this journey and trying to help wake people up.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And we'll definitely come back to some of what you shared later. I'm so excited for the wonderful foundation that you've set for us so far. Claudia, how about you?
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much, Gwenna, for sharing. It's so moving and inspiring. So my name is Claudia Lifton. I work currently for an organization called Mercy for Animals. I work really closely with restaurants, assisting restaurant chains and adding more plant-based options to their menus. I also sit on the Mayor's Sustainability Advisory Council and Mayor Hancock's Sustainable Food Policy Committee, as well as a working group, the Institutional Procurement Working Group of Governor Polis's Colorado Food Systems Advisory Council. So that's what I'm doing currently. I am working on getting some plant-forward policies passed and some plant-forward language included in some upcoming bills and an upcoming executive order that I'm really hoping will be able to get passed. For the past 7 years, I worked for the Factory Farming Awareness Coalition. So when I moved out to Colorado, I started working for FFAC and spent, 6 years. I said 7 because I've been gone for a year, but for 6 years, I worked at FFAC and spent pretty much all day long doing presentations in high schools and colleges and offices and really whoever would have me about the environmental, social justice, public health, and animal welfare and workers' rights impacts of industrial animal agriculture. So that's what I've been doing since being in Colorado. My journey actually started with earthworms, funnily enough. I was obsessed with worms and insects as a kid and just would cry and cry and cry when kids would kill them at recess and run to the principal crying. And I was cruelly labeled bug girl, which was carried until high school. But now I wear it as a badge of honor, and I love my bug girl status. And yeah, in college, I worked at an animal shelter and had been vegetarian for a while, but upon learning about the dairy industry, similar to you, Gwenna, I made the switch and haven't looked back since. And then I think working at Catskill Animal Sanctuary really was what kind of solidified the fact that I wanted to spend my life committed to farmed animals. Even after working at, animal shelters and working with different species of wildlife abroad, farmed animals kind of became my main focus. And working at Catskill Animal Sanctuary was a pretty transformative experience.
I love it. That's amazing. I was a teacher before this, and I had several students who would do the same thing at recess, and they would come crying to me about like the worms on the playground, and we would go and we would like have a little conversation with first graders about how each student was feeling, and it was honestly a very beautiful thing to be a part of, and I'm excited to see what those kids grow up and become, especially based on your own story. So thank you for sharing all of that. Thank you both. I think that you both bring very interesting, different and connected perspectives to this conversation. And when we're talking about the connection between animal rights and human rights, I know that you both have a lot of experience to kind of help us and our listeners to bridge that gap. So let's go ahead and dive into the first official question that I have for you both. And sometimes I pause because I can edit this and I can catch my thoughts for a minute. So if either of you need to do that too, feel free.
It looks like Gwenna is muted and can't unmute herself.
Thank you for showing that. Okay, let me change settings. Participants, here we go. And no, not ask to unmute. I have to unmute you.
I am going to get this thing out of my dog's mouth that he's going to eat.
Yeah,
I'll be right back.
Definitely do that. I have to figure out how to change these settings. Oh, here we go. I think, oh, there we go. That works. I think you can unmute now.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
I was like, oh God, nobody reads it. I'm gonna be like,
No, that's fine. This is why we have like the joys of editing, and we can just, figure out technical difficulties. I'm just going to leave that setting the way it is now because there's no patrons here right now. So I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen again. Okay, and I'll get the chat to go away on my side. Okay, there we go. Okay. Yeah, I think going into the next question, Gwenna, I'm probably going to have you go first on it, if that's okay with you.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
That sounds good.
Awesome. Hopefully Claudia's dog is okay.
I know. I saw her looking, and I have a little furry animal with me, but she's a cat, but I just have to make sure she doesn't eat my plants because she'll eat them and then puke them up, and I have to clean it up.
Oh my gosh, that's terrible.
She loves greens. Like, she loves lettuce, she loves spinach, anything leafy, like she tears it up. So the plants, she doesn't know any difference, and then she'll chew them, and then she'll vomit it up.
Oh my gosh. You're like, thank you so much for that. That's exactly what I'm
like, one more thing I got to do today. Clean up your puke.
Oh my gosh. My dog was doing, well, it's not consistent, but just last week, she happened to be doing something similar with like our plants in our yard. And she was just having some real stomach issues after that.
Oh,
I was like, what did you eat?
Let me see if she'll come and do a debut. China. Okay, she's coming.
Oh, cute. My mom loves cats, but all of us kids were allergic, so she never could have one.
Oh. Hi, honey bunny. Let me see if she doesn't really like to be put on. She knows when she's being put on display.
Oh. Oh my gosh, those whiskers, they're so long. Oh, she's so cute.
Yeah, she's like very she's like a little lion right now.
Oh my gosh, that is super cute. Oh, and now, okay, hold on, I have to change settings again because Claudia can't start her video.
Uh-oh.
Okay, start video. Okay, that should work, Claudia. Here we go.
Yay. Okay, awesome.
Doggy must be okay.
He is totally fine. He was just trying to eat a sock.
Oh my gosh.
As they do.
Yeah, you're like, that's a really great idea. Thanks, dog.
He's trying to spend all your money in the emergency room.
I know, right? It's crazy. He is about 8.5 months old.
Oh.
But he's an old soul. He's not too crazy. It's really just the sock eating that's the problem. But he's very sweet. So yeah, I appreciate your patience as I went and took care of that.
Oh yeah, no problem. I got to meet Gwenna's cat. So
yeah. She made a
awesome.
debut.
Oh, I love it.
So cute. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So diving into the first official question that I have for you both, in this series, many facets of veganism are being covered, including like physical health and nutritional benefits, veganism's impact on the earth and climate change, even the psychology behind the relationship with our food and each other. In this conversation, I really want to focus on the connection between animal rights and human rights. And so let's first just set the foundation. Each of you have kind of said a little bit about this already, but let's take a deep dive into how each of you would describe animal rights and human rights. And you can approach that from whatever angle you'd like. And then Gwenna, if you want to start this one, I also have a specific question for you in that many people within my own personal circle have mentioned things like, well, you know, a vegan diet still kills plants and plants are living things too. So, you know, why don't you care about that? And so I wonder if that might be able to be a part of your, like what you share with us, because I know that in your dream, you talked a lot about like the consciousness of animals.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe distinguishing between like conscious living beings versus just like living beings like plants.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So for me, when it comes to human rights and animal rights, it's weird because I'm in this space of I don't even really like using the term rights, even for humans and animals, because it implies that that's something that I need to have or something that I need to obtain when sovereignty belongs to everybody.
Yeah.
It's a fact. Sovereignty is a fact. Everything else to me is just a complete illusion and us playing into pretend authority and pretend power and just collectively agreeing that, okay, you're a government and you're in control of my taxes and how much money I get. You're in control of this, but these are all just agreed upon things. These aren't real things. Really, no one has rights over anyone. You don't even own like your children. Like everybody is completely like sovereign and comes to this planet free with, you know, the food grows for free. Like I can imagine if I'm on another planet, I'm like, yeah, their food grows for free. They don't even have to do anything. They just put a seed in the ground and it grows. The water comes for free, but we've manipulated powers and energy to where now we have to go out and earn a living. We have to go out and make money. We have to create these we have to have careers. All these careers, other than people that I feel that are in the position that are like helping trying to like change the planet. But for the most part, these are all made to me, the whole thing is just like made up. It's like a whole big game. And it's like when I saw in my dream, not in my dream, sorry, when I saw the video Darius effing scary, and I immediately was like, oh, this is the same blueprint that they used to make people believe that Black people weren't fully human, that we were created for them, that, you know, they even quoted scriptures in the Bible to manipulate that, to make it seem like that's what God said and what God wanted. Same thing with the animals. There's scriptures in there that says, oh, but you can eat them and you can eat these beings and these species, which is a whole other conversation I want to get into, but yeah, I just believe in complete sovereignty and restoring that truth. So like for me, I do a lot of food work and I don't even like to be in the food justice space. Like I'm not fighting for rights. I'm not fighting for food security. I'm just creating another form of balance to make sure that people are entitled, which they are, to good quality plant-based foods. And then the other part, what was the other part of your question? So I'm like, I really want to answer that.
Oh yeah, just the specific example, because I feel like it comes up a lot that, you know,
Okay.
plants are living things as well. So why don't we care about them is kind of their
Yeah.
take on veganism.
So I have a different take on it. I'm not going to be quick to say that a plant doesn't possess a high form of intelligence, but I do know that they don't run when you go to pick them. They don't scream. They don't, you know, they don't cry out. And I felt like if they did, then yeah, that would be an issue. But they don't do these things. And because the plant has a form of life, and I don't debate with people on that question. That's why I don't even like when people say, "Oh, but okay, all right, you win." Okay, let's say the plant is conscious, but maybe it's conscious in the way that it's a pleasure for it to be eaten. Like this is what it knows it was created for. It doesn't mean that it's going to feel pain or terror when we actually consume it because it's going in our body. It's coming out, supposed to go back into the earth and it'll recycle itself in some other way, shape, or form. So So yeah, I don't do the argument over the over plants, but like I said, they don't cry out, and they are a form of nutrition. There's people that are like shamans and people that are like in um, Native American culture that had the gift to speak to plants. Like, how did people know what the healing power of herbs or certain plants? They had to have some form of some type of communication to know what these plants were capable of doing.
Mm.
So to me, this thing runs pretty deep. So I
Mm.
could go into different tangents, but
Oh yeah, we really could. We could have an entire conversation just on this,
yes.
but I think that the answer that you gave was so like concise, and I think that our language around this is really important, and like you said, agreeing with people where they're at too. Like there are certain things that are just not worth
Yeah,
debating over, but at the same time, we could all probably agree that like none of us really think twice when we go to like pick a carrot from the ground or something, but
that's
we
right.
definitely think twice if we are like told that we have to go butcher a chicken or something like that.
That's
So
right. That's
there's a
right.
very, very stark difference there.
Yeah, and I always say, hope, as we evolve as human beings and this planet evolves, that maybe we'll evolve to one day to not even having to have food. Maybe we'll just be solar powered people and we just live off the sun and don't have to eat. But for right now, plants is it.
Wouldn't that be so nice?
Oh, that'd be great to get rid of all that stress about food and weight gain. Oh my God, that'd be amazing.
I would love that so much. But oh man, well, Claudia, what are your thoughts on this whole conversation?
Is it okay if I get a little snarky?
Always.
Okay. So when I get the plants have feelings comment, which I get all the time, and used to get multiple times a day, every day when I was talking to hundreds of high school students a day about these
Oh,
issues.
high school students?
Yep.
Yikes.
Exactly.
Yikes.
Exactly. My go-to is, would you rather stab a watermelon or your dog?
Ooh.
Oh yeah.
Have you ever mowed your lawn? And would you feel more comfortable doing that again, or would you rather like cut off the tail of a cat? So I think that just like those comments are so clearly a defense mechanism. It's very clearly coming from a place of defensiveness and cognitive dissonance, but I do find that it's important to kind of put them in their place and acknowledge and remark on the absurdity of them. Also, if you look at like the anatomy of a cucumber and a cat, you will see a lot of differences there, right?
Yes.
I
Yes.
thought you were gonna say similar. I was waiting. I'm like, what?
Yeah. But if people do continue to kind of go on and on and on about the plants and feelings, one thing that I do really like to mention is that most of the crops grown on planet Earth are grown to feed farmed animals.
Yes.
So, if you really are truly concerned about the feelings of plants, everyone has to eat. But if you want to save lots of plants, you should eat plant-based foods, because every time you eat a steak, you're killing way more plants than you do in like months and months and months of eting a vegan diet. So
Genius.
if
Genius.
people really want to get down to it, let's get down to it.
I love it. Oh my gosh, thank you. These are the types of like common misconceptions that I feel like are so worthwhile to clear up here, because
Absolutely,
we're
yeah.
not trying to like shame anyone or embarrass anyone, but like you said, there are deep-rooted reasons for why these defense mechanisms are coming out. And so when we're having conversations about veganism, if it strikes a nerve or a chord or whatever that phrase is, even listeners right now, if it is striking a nerve, like it's definitely worthwhile to look inward and reflect on why, like what's the deeper reason maybe behind why it's striking a nerve.
Yeah.
So, okay, Claudia, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to kind of expand on that conversation about human rights. I think the main reason really that there's so much attention on and focus on farm worker rights, which is super important. People working in fields are extremely exploited, and they're exposed to pesticides and sun exposure, and children under 12 years old are forced to work for up to 14 hours a day. There's so much exploitation in the production of plant-based foods, of course. But whenever you tell someone that you eat a vegan diet, that's kind of their first response. They automatically or often start talking about like exploited farm workers. But the reason it's so much easier to talk about exploited farm workers than it is to talk about exploited slaughterhouse workers, because the word slaughter automatically brings up this deep discomfort in people because it makes them immediately feel responsible.
Yeah.
And I mean, yes, of course, it's so important that we pay attention to how farm workers are treated, but would you rather pick a strawberry or slit a pig's throat? Which one would cause you more trauma?
Yeah.
And also, if we're talking about like exposure to toxic chemicals, people working in factory farms and slaughterhouses have it the worst, right? They're exposed to antibiotic resistant bacteria, feces. The majority of slaughterhouse workers suffer from severe upper respiratory infections. 40% of hog farm workers tested positive for MRSA, which is an antibiotic resistant staph infection. And if you live near a factory farm, you're 3 times more likely to be a MRSA carrier. And of course, most of the people living near factory farms are lower income folks or lower income communities of color. So, you know, and not just the inherent trauma of killing animals all day long. It's essentially like going to war. We're paying people less than minimum wage to essentially go to war every single day in this country so that we can eat cheap meat that's destroying our planet and making our kids sick. So yeah, farm workers are important, but slaughterhouse workers should be a priority here. And they're not, for very obvious reasons, because talking just the word meat industry, just the word vegan is so triggering for people that are so clearly conflicted about their own choices. You know, there is an average of 2 worker amputations a week in chicken slaughterhouses. The machinery is moving so quickly that it cuts off their hands.
Oh
You
my
know, this is
gosh.
machinery designed to cut apart bodies. And the slaughter lines move so quickly that it's cutting their body parts off. Chicken slaughterhouse workers are often forced to wear diapers at work. They're not given bathroom breaks. The majority of slaughterhouse workers are undocumented folks, typically people of color. Many are women of color who face extremely high rates of sexual harassment and sexual violence. And it's happening like the meat industry likes it. It's happening behind closed doors. We can see people outside picking fruits and vegetables. Similarly to how like we can see the water that we're using when we take a shower, but we don't really see the water that it takes to produce a burger. We can see these farm workers, right? So they come to the top of our minds, but slaughterhouse workers are hidden, and it's very intentional. And of course, you know, slaughterhouses were one of the major hotspots for COVID, the spread of COVID. There's higher rates of domestic violence in communities with large amounts of slaughterhouse workers, again, because of that trauma, and many of them end up committing suicide or end up in mental hospitals. I mean, we're literally paying people unlivable wages to go to war on our behalf every single day.
Can I add, like, I'm so happy to hear you talk about slaughterhouse workers, because often what I find in the animal rights vegan movement are where we vegans, animal rights activists, demonize slaughterhouse workers to a point of just, I had a breaking moment where I'm like, you know, I can't be on social media that much, because I got into a knockout, drag down fight with someone online that was talking about slaughterhouse workers and how they deserve to have their throats cut. And I'm like, and everything you said, I was like, do you understand? Like, sometimes people that are just coming out of prison, these are the only jobs that they can get.
Well, and
Or
often it is prison. It is people
yes,
in prison that are forced to work in slaughterhouses.
yes, that as
Um,
well. That as well. So it was,
or companies will meet folks at the border and promise them a path to citizenship and promise them good pay, and they can't leave. And if they, I mean, it's a really big problem in the vegan movement, especially within white veganism, that we are
yes,
demonizing these workers. And there's a lot of problems and myths that need to be dispelled in the general population, but also within the vegan movement itself. And I'm glad that we're having these conversations.
absolutely. So thank you for that, because you're probably the first person I've heard that expressed such depth and empathy for them, that I'm like, finally, like, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I feel like I need to sit with that for a minute before just diving right into the next question, because so much of that information I knew, but you shared a few things that were completely new to me. And it's amazing how much you can still be learning after years.
Yeah.
I've been vegan for almost 5 years, and just still learning all the time. But like you said, this is very, very strategically hidden from us. And I think that's another point to be very, what's the word, aware of in these conversations, whether it's over social media or in person. And I was talking about this with vegan psychologist Claire Mann, who's also on this podcast series. She was talking about, we have all been lied to. We are being lied to. And at some point, all of us had to come to the awareness of this, like these truths. And so I need to at least constantly remind myself of that and put myself in people's shoes who are not yet aware of these things. And so, of course, they're feeling defensive. They're feeling like they need to protect themselves from being judged against, or feeling like they're, being condemned for their food and their actions, when really it's just, we've all been lied to. And but the sad thing is that it's still happening. So we need to become aware of it. As uncomfortable as that might make us feel, we have to become aware of it. So I'm very thankful for this conversation already. And Claudia, if you could expand a little bit more for listeners who are new to all of this, maybe they are not even sure what the factory farms really are that you're talking about, or the term like CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations. I know a lot of people, again, in my circle, who talk about, well, I hate factory farms too, but there are humane forms of animal agriculture. And again, this might be very personally connected to them, maybe their family's heritage, whatever it is. Could you share a little bit more of your thoughts on, like, what do you think about humane forms of animal agriculture?
Yeah. I think that the word humane has, humane washing is, of course, a huge problem within the industry. The word humane, if you look it up, like on, in the dictionary, it means benevolence, essentially kindness. So I don't know if there's a benevolent way to slit someone's throat that doesn't want to die. And people like to just use the word humane to remove themselves from what's happening. But when you get into kind of the details of what humane slaughter means in industry terms, it essentially means that you're just shooting an animal in the head with a steel bolt gun so that they're hopefully stunned and can't feel it when you slit their throats, and then they bleed out. So the word humane does not coincide, it does not match the description of what that kind of slaughter looks like. I also think that arguably, having worked in this movement for almost a decade, I think one of the most significant barriers that we face as a movement is the unbelievable success of the meat and dairy industries and the egg industry of humane washing and greenwashing their products. Labels like organic, free range, cage free are essentially meaningless. And again, people kind of hide behind those labels to make themselves feel better about what they're contributing to. And that just allows the meat industry and dairy industry to keep doing exactly what they're doing with no public lashback and even public praise. So I think it's important to note that one, organic really has no animal welfare standard. The organic label just means that the animals are not fed antibiotics or genetically modified corn and soy, but they're still sent to the same exact slaughterhouses. They're still raised in the same exact conditions. There's no regulations or requirements on how much outdoors time, or even if the animals get time outdoors with the organic label. Cage free just means that they're not in battery cages for chickens. So they're not in individual like metal cages with metal bars, but cage free facilities are often worse because the chickens, there's the higher risk of cannibalism, and trampling one another to death because they're still packed into tiny spaces. You know, there could be 30 to 50,000 chickens in one shed. So instead of cages, they're just, you know, stomping on top of one another. Free range just means that there's like a tiny kind of slit that they can, so basically there could be a barn with 30 to 50,000 birds. And if there's one kind of corner that has like a very small door that opens up to a tiny, tiny dirt patch, and maybe 2 or 3 chickens can step foot outside a day, that's technically considered free range, right? So the labels are really misleading. And then of course, even if, for example, in the case of chickens, even if those chickens really were truly free range, if they are the breed of chicken that we're raising for food right now, it wouldn't even matter because they can't even stand up after they're a few weeks old. We have selectively bred chickens and turkeys to grow to twice their natural size in half the time. So by the time they're just a few weeks old, they're suffering from heart attacks and organ failure. Their legs are breaking underneath them. They are dying from flip over syndrome, where they are just splayed out on their backs and can't turn around, can't get themselves over. So yeah, those labels have really damaged the movement and damaged progress significantly, I think. Humane washing, I think, is one of the most significant barriers that we face as a movement generally. And also greenwashing, you know, saying that grass-fed beef is better than factory farmed meat. It may be a little bit better for the animals that get to spend the majority of their lives on pasture, but it's actually far worse environmentally speaking. Grass-fed beef is the #1 cause of deforestation in the Amazon and the US.
Yep.
Grass-fed cows produce more greenhouse gas emissions. There is the majority of wildlife killings. People don't realize this. They care so deeply about wolves and bobcats and foxes, and they get upset about, you know, wildlife services, which is a branch of the USDA, killing off wild horses and with, you know, helicopters. But the reason that's happening is for the production of grass-fed beef, right? Wildlife services, it really almost exclusively kills wild animals, millions and millions of wild animals each year on the behest of ranchers, because they're killing their cattle, or, you know, prairie dogs are digging holes in the earth that the cows can fall into. So yeah, I think those labels are really misleading and really problematic. I think, of course, you know, it's important to be culturally sensitive if there are communities that are using kind of like traditional methods of slaughter or hunting and gathering. That's not our problem. That's not even the tip of the iceberg, right? But I do think that it's important to dispel those myths.
It is. And to emphasize as well that all of this is for a cause that is unnecessary. I think that there could be a lot of listeners who are listening to this and they may because, and I think this because I've been there. So that's why I say this. I remember thinking, okay, yes, I agree. All of this sounds terrible, but isn't it just the circle of life? Everything here is supposed to die. And so if it dies, at least it dies with a purpose. And this is just the way things need to be. Right. So I know that there are thoughts running through people's heads right now like this, but I'm going to reemphasize that this is completely unnecessary. There is another episode in this podcast series with Dr. Neil Bernard, who is like one of the world's top leading doctors in this field. And he clarifies it very, very much in depth in that episode. But it is not necessary to eat any of these animals or their byproducts. So
also, show me a lion that keeps their prey locked in a crate so small that they can't turn around for their whole lives and artificially inseminates them and eats their babies and impregnates them every cycle over and over again until they can no longer stand up and then slaughter. Like, what we're doing is blasphemous. What we're doing is an insult to nature. It is an insult to the circle of life. This is not the circle of life. This is a sickness. What's happening in these factory farms? It is a sickness. Also, like, I don't have canine teeth. We don't. Like,
people think they do, though. People think
they really do.
It's like, well, then just go eat the cow without doing all the breaking it. Just go right up to the cow and just start chewing on the cow. Then if you have canine teeth,
right? I know. My teeth are like not very pointy, so just look at a lion's mouth. Trust me, I've done research on. I've researched lions. I've been close up with them. It is terrifying.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
My mouth looks nothing like that of a lion. It looks a lot like the mouth of a cow, though. My teeth look a lot like the mouth of a cow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Claudia, thank you so much for sharing everything that you did. I think that you touched on every possible clarification point I could have even thought of, and then some. So thank you so much for that. It was insanely helpful. And I would love to, shift this conversation in a slightly different direction. Going back to something that you shared, Gwenna, earlier about, I think you called them the blueprints of systematic oppression and slavery and exploitation that you recognized within this animal agriculture industry. So I would love if we could share a little bit about let's see.
Sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something important. I was like, are the settings off again? No, but I would love if you would be willing to share about those connections that you've seen between animal agriculture and then social justice issues and slavery and exploitation and all of that.
Yeah, well, for me, it starts at the programming. When I first came to these revelations and I'm like, wow, cows love. And then, I watched, the Dairy is Scary and found out that cows are pregnant for 9 months and saw what we did to their body. I was under the impression until 2016 that a farmer put his little overalls on, he got on the wooden stoop and he milked the cow and the milk just came out effortlessly and she said moo, and like, that's crazy. That's how I thought we were getting all this milk. Like, sometimes I'm still mad. I'm like, you didn't even question any of this stuff. Like, so I'm thinking this is how we get our milk. And then when I find out the truth, I'm like, wait a minute, if this is, and I'm, being taught that you get your calcium from milk and you get your protein from flesh and this, and I'm like, wait a minute, I've been lied to my entire life. And I learned this in school. And if they're lying to me, who's giving them the curriculum? Who is the who? Who's running this ship? Who is creating these structures and putting these things in place and programming us from the time that we get out of the womb to make us, you see cows jumping around and they're happy, and you see pigs, funny and telling jokes, and yet we're not making the connection that, these animals have personalities, but yet we're being told to eat them. And I just started questioning everything because I'm like, this whole thing needs to be cracked wide open. Like, we're being lied to on so many levels. And, you know, I started my career working for vegan outreach and giving talks and giving out meals and things like that in exchange for people listening and things like that. And so I've learned how to kind of craft my conversation based on who the audience is. But one thing that is pretty universal, because I've learned from terrible experience, like, you know, certain black and brown communities don't go in talking about animal rights, not in that straight, linear, basic way. So I learned how to kind of craft that. And so one day I was talking and it just kind of came out naturally. And I'm like, what type of society? Like, we're like you were saying, Claude, like, it's sick. And I'm like, so we take the animal, and this is what I say to people. I first ask people if they can, you know, has anyone ever suffered before? Has anyone ever felt violated? Anyone ever felt like, you know, they didn't matter, or their voice wasn't being heard, or people don't see you? And so I talk to people about animals in that way, because that's something that a lot of people have in common, is who hasn't had some form of suffering at some point in their life. If they're at least 30 years old, you've experienced something that you can relate to. But you know, when I was talking and I was like, you know, with these animals, we first of all, we eat their bodies, we eat their legs and their butts and their backs, we eat their necks and their arms and their feet, their butts. You know, we crack open their butts and stuff bread in it and call it Thanksgiving. Like, just sick when you think about it. And then not only do we, you know, eat their body parts, we also go inside their bodies and we eat their organs, we eat their livers, we eat their hearts. Then we take their ribs, their rib cages. Like, can you imagine somebody, you know, hungry for your ribs? You know, we eat their ribs. Then we're not done. We then take the skin off their bodies and we wear them. We take the fur off their bodies and we call them, you know, clothing and things like that. And so when I'm usually saying that, people are like, oh my God, that sounds disgusting. It's like, yeah, it sounds like a cult. Sounds like a complete blood cult, that you're eating some bodies, you're drinking blood, you're eating babies, you're like, and that's facts. I'm not just like, you know, I can word it this way, but these are facts. We're eating babies. We're eating somebody's son. We're eating somebody's daughter. We're eating somebody's mother, somebody's father. And that usually plants a seed in people, because they're visualizing what I'm saying, and they also know I'm telling the truth. Like, yeah, it sounds gross, but you think. And then we eat, like, one thing I always try to remember is to say, we eat breasts. What? We're eating somebody's breast? And that's called, like, that's like the good stuff. That's like healthy, you know, white meat or whatever, to help prevent cancers and things like that. But it couldn't be more cancer causing. Imagine taking on the DNA of another animal's breast. You're eating somebody else's breast, somebody's feet. So, and then I'm into the whole energy aspect of it, because to me, it's like taking on the suffering. You know, when you're eating tissue and eating flesh, tissue holds trauma, you know, and these animals almost always know what's getting ready to happen to them. And you're then cooking that, and you're not only consuming the flesh, but because of the juices, the blood, and the tissue, there's a scientific point of it. I don't know how to break it down, but it is scientific that you are also taking in spiritual matter, which probably, you know, I wouldn't be surprised of why certain people may have anxiety or have depression or have certain things that they just can't, you know, because they keep eating the same type of food. So yeah, I don't even know if I answered your question, but I go off.
No, please keep going off. This is all so important for us to hear, just put so bluntly. You're just speaking it exactly how it is. And it, again, it makes people uncomfortable. It makes us cringe and everything, but it's because of the stark truth of it all. So
Gwenna, that was so powerful. I am moved. That was beautiful. Thank you for saying everything you just said.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And I'm so sorry I interrupted you, Katie.
No, I was gonna say, because like I like all the stuff you said, because you you come more like with the facts. I'm not as good on facts because I don't like school and stuff like that. So I'm not good with facts. I'm more of a feeler
Mm,
and download that, so it's easy for me to talk in this way, but I need to also be more on the facts because not everybody gets them. For most people don't care about the spiritual part. Like that's a
mm,
small percentage of people. Most people want to hear the science, they want to hear the data. Everybody is stimulated in a different way
yeah.
where it may make sense based on how this person explains it, to where I could say it to somebody and they're like, where I need some proof. Let me see
Mm.
where that's in writing. So
Mhm.
thank
But
you
I
for
love,
what you shared.
I love what Katie said about how like putting it so bluntly just makes it so clear how vulgar and vile this all is, because yeah, like we shroud ourselves in euphemism constantly, right?
Mhm.
Like we say beef instead of cow. We say pork instead of pig. We
Yeah.
say slaughter instead of murder. And then we sound extreme when we use the word murder, right?
Mhm.
We are just constantly so deeply desperate to avoid what's happening. And
Yes.
again, yeah, it's just so preventable. It's so unnecessary. All of this
Mhm.
destruction, all of this sickness, all of this suffering, it is just so unnecessary.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's the craziest part to me. It's not like, it's not like oil and gas where it's very destructive and we need to find an alternative, but we do need energy. We do need to be able to get around and heat our houses, and
Mhm.
we do not need to eat animals. We do
Right.
not need, this does not need to be happening. It's crazy to think of just how disastrous and destructive this is, and it's just completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
Mhm. Exactly. I'm trying to, you sparked something in my mind and I'm trying to remember what it was. Unnecessary. Oh my gosh, it totally left.
It'll come back.
There was
Oh, I remember now. Are you
yeah,
okay? Okay, because I
yeah,
don't want to lose it again.
no, yeah.
And I think that, hold on. Okay, I lost it again. Okay, I've got it for real. No, and I think that this is so important because it's unnecessary, like we've clarified, but also I think
Yeah.
that people have this misconception in their head that, well, if we don't do this, then all these animals are just going to be like running wild and taking over the earth,
Yes.
right? And so then what are we going to do? Like, but that's just honestly not true, because it is unnatural what we've created. We
Yeah.
are breeding
Yes.
billions and
Yeah.
billions of animals for consumption, and that's it.
Animals that, by the way, by design, literally couldn't even survive on their own.
Mhm.
I mean, their environments are so controlled that they wouldn't even really, like chickens could barely live past 6 weeks. So
Mhm.
even if they were able to breed, which now, by the way, they're not, it's you know, literally like, shoot, what's the word in the, it's uh, animal bestiality. It's
Oh,
basically bestiality, the way
Mhm.
that we're breeding and inseminating these animals. They can't even mate on their own. So no, they wouldn't take over the world. Like they wouldn't even be able to like reproduce on their own or exist outside of these like artificial environments that we've created for them.
Yeah.
mhm. Oh, okay. So we have clarified all of the, just like the stark truths behind this industry and what we're doing, the ways that we're being lied to, the fact that this is unnecessary, a lot of other, misconceptions we've cleared up here. And why am I like losing all my thoughts now? Um
Information overload. We've been overloading.
Seriously, it's so much. Um, oh my gosh.
There
Oh,
there is
and
one misconception that I do want to also address at some point. I don't know if that's what
yes.
you were,
No,
is
yeah,
that,
let's go back to that. Mhm.
yeah. So one of, I think, the most common things that all vegans hear is that like tofu is destroying the Amazon rainforest, and soy is the antichrist. I think it's very important to note that roughly 2.7 or almost 3% of the soy grown on the planet is grown to produce like tofu and soy milk. 70% of all of the soy grown on Earth is grown to feed farmed animals. 70% of it. And then that other percentage is used to produce like oil. So, conventional kitchens are using vegetable oil, or processed food like potato chips have soybean oil typically. So yeah, again, almost all of the destruction of the Amazon rainforest is due to grass-fed beef production and growing soy that's fed to animals.
Yes. Which goes, again, there's a whole other episode coming in this podcast series about it, but the environmental impacts of the, meat and dairy industry is just astronomical. And honestly, it is scientifically proven that we could reverse climate change and the terrible devastation that we've done to our planet if we were to go towards a vegan, plant-based diet. So yeah, I think that these are incredibly important points in my mind that we've cleared up. And then, bringing it back to Gwenna's thoughts too about we've been here before. We've done this before. What we're doing right now is speciesism, which I didn't even hear that word until like this year. But speciesism, putting certain species above others in like a class order. We've been there before. We've done that in other parts of our social history with race and cultures and people groups. And so dehumanizing any living being, whether it's an animal or human animal, dehumanizing, talking down like the life that's within that being is a classic trait of all those ism words, sexism, racism, speciesism, all of it. So kind of bringing it in for a landing now, because this has all been important, but it's also been very heavy information. I would love if each of you could share 1 to 3 actionable steps that our listeners could take as soon as today. Like maybe they're feeling really conflicted and stirred up emotions inside, or maybe they're like totally pumped up. They're like, all right, cool, I want to go vegan tomorrow, whatever they're feeling. What would be like 1 to 3 tangible steps that you would recommend for our listeners to take to just, expand their education, their understanding around human rights, animal rights, veganism, any of that?
I can go ahead and the first thing that I tell anyone is, even if you never go vegan, even if you just eliminate certain things out of your diet, make it chicken and fish. If you want to have the biggest bang for your buck, if you want to have the biggest impact possible, not only from a human rights perspective, but also from an animal, suffering perspective, chicken and fish should be the first to go. Even if that's all you ever do is chicken and fish, that's still doing a lot. So that I would say is number 1. And to expand on that, it's just important to note that chickens make up 88% of the 9 billion animals killed in the country each year. Wow. But they have the least legal protection. So chickens are actually exempt from the Humane Slaughter Act, which means it's technically not illegal to boil them alive. According to the USDA, there are 10 million chickens scalded to death in defeathering tanks every single day. So, we get so mad about the Yulin Dog Meat Festival. It's like 20,000 dogs in a couple of weeks. This is 10 million a day. Anyways, yeah. So chickens, and also just the way that chickens are bred, their whole lives from birth to death, just it couldn't be worse. So avoiding chicken, even if it has those labels like we talked about, like organic and cage free and all that stuff, and avoiding fish. If you're not ready to avoid all fish yet, the biggest bang for your buck will be avoiding shrimp. I can go into that, but I know we're trying to end on a positive note, and I don't want to talk about too many disturbing things, but
they can go Google it.
Yeah, from an environmental and human rights perspective, I would say, like, really focusing on getting shrimp out of your diet is important.
Mhm.
And then beyond that, I would say the second step would be educating yourself and educating others. You know, clearly, Gwenna, you know, you gave up dairy because you watched a single video. Even if you yourself are not ready to go completely vegan, which is okay, it's so important to get this information out there because the meat industry is so desperate to keep it hidden.
Mhm.
So I think like it's a revolutionary act to post on social media about this thing that's so hidden from us so intentionally by this unbelievably powerful industry. That is a powerful act. And then if you want to get more involved, start volunteering. You know, the organization I work for, Mercy for Animals, the organization that Gwenna worked for, Vegan Outreach, they both have robust volunteer programs. There's so many sanctuaries all over the place. I know, just a shout out in Colorado, I'm on the board of a animal sanctuary called Good Life Refuge, and we're always in need of volunteers in any capacity. So take some time to find where your passions are. If you're good at fundraising, fundraise for an org, fundraise for a sanctuary. If you want to work directly with the animals, do that. If you know, are really excited about leafleting, go leaflet. If you want to educate, do some presentations. There's so many orgs out there that are in need of help, and you can use whatever skill you have and whatever passion area that you have to make a difference in this movement and make a difference for animals.
Wonderful. First of all, I didn't know this statistic you just said. You said chickens are 88% of
Yeah.
the animal population that are slaughtered per year.
88% of the animals killed in the country are chickens, and
Is
they
that
have the least protection.
for United States of America?
Yep, just the US. So
Okay.
yeah.
Wow, I'm just gonna jot this down because I need to add this to my arsenal. This is excellent. I had no idea. Thank you for that extra fact I have now. I would say one thing that I'm working on, because I have a food bank that I just started in May, and we operate at 2 different locations. We have a brick and mortar and another physical location twice a month.
Wow.
And I do it because, you know, I feel like everyone is entitled to good food, but I'm working on a booklet so that people can be educated. You know, they're just not taking the food that's vegan. Like I'm going to have them like learn some facts and things like this. So this is really good information. I've never heard this before. And I've heard about so much stuff. I've never heard that chickens are 88%. I always thought it was cows were the most slaughtered animals. I didn't know, but chickens makes complete sense. It makes complete sense.
Yeah, because it takes like almost 300 chickens to produce the same amount of meat as a single cow.
Wow.
Yeah.
And also in terms of like pounds per, we eat, Americans just love chicken. We eat more pounds of chicken per year than we do any other type of meat.
Yep.
And it takes so many more chickens to produce the same amount of pounds of meat as it does a cow or a pig.
Yeah.
So from
Yeah.
like a effective altruism standpoint,
Mhm.
or like from an animal protection or animal suffering perspective, chicken is an important one to focus on.
Yeah. So yeah. So anyway, one thing that I want people, especially in Black and Brown communities or that are dealing with, you know, financial challenges, I can't say it enough to people, like, don't drink milk. Like that stuff is toxic to the body. There's so much like, you know, legal amount of pus and blood that they allow in the milk. And it's weird because you can get a bottle of water and on the back it will say the ingredients, you know, let you know how much sodium and how much magnesium is in it, but you don't get that with milk. They don't do that with milk. They don't do that with meat. They don't do that
dairy
with
lobby is a powerful thing.
And it's like, and people always think, oh, that's processed. It's like, no, what you're drinking and eating is incredibly processed. They just don't put the ingredients on stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like when you're telling people about the pus and the blood and all that. So I guess my point is people need to research what is legally allowed in milk. That way it doesn't sound like I'm just making up something. Research what's legally allowed to be in the milk and compare that to the United States versus other countries. Like we're like way over the top. So like people can just like educate themselves. They would stop drinking that toxic liquid.
An eyedropper full of pus, by the way. That's the legal limit.
Gross.
In every 8-ounce glass of milk. Yeah.
No.
And also, not even to mention, like, you know, even organic, like milk is literally just a growth hormone, right? That's why they have to say no added growth hormones when it's organic, quote unquote. Because
the trickery.
It's just a growth hormone. It only exists to grow a baby calf from like 75 pounds to 600 pounds in 9 months. That's why it exists.
Yeah.
Like, and then we wonder why girls are getting their periods so early. We're wondering why people are getting breast cancer and ovarian cancer at higher rates than ever before. And we're worried about estrogen and soy.
I know.
again, thanks to the dairy industry lobby who put out all of that pseudoscience research.
Yep.
Because they're so scared of soy. Yes. Thank you for bringing that up. I could, yeah. Down with the dairy industry, man. That's my whole spiel.
But yeah, I just wish people would be better, like take the time to research what's in that stuff, because the food bank that I work with, there's already a physical food bank, and so they share one of their weeks with me where I take over and I completely veganize one of their weeks. Wow. But the other weeks, they got milk. They got, you know, clams in a can. They got, you know, and when people would come to my week, they'd be like, any milk? And I'm like, oh no, you're never going to see any cow's milk here.
Gwenna, that is so amazing and important. I can't emphasize enough how just impressive it is that you've been able to do that, and how huge that is to even just like let folks see that other alternatives exist.
Exactly.
That's huge. And again, like milk is a huge racial issue. I don't know. I mean, of course, like the fact that like only really white Europeans have the enzyme to digest it. So we're poisoning children in schools that are Black and brown. We're essentially forcing milk on them because the dairy lobby is so goddamn powerful. We're forcing poison on them, and then they're performing more poorly than their white counterparts at school, which just adds another, and are way more likely to suffer from chronic illness, which just adds another layer onto the already massive mountains that are stacked against them.
That's right.
That's racist as fuck to serve Black and brown children and Indigenous children milk. That is,
and I didn't even know that until just a few years ago. Like, forget me being vegan, I still didn't even know about this part until I saw a video about Dr. Milton Mills confronting, and I'm watching, I'm like, another mystery uncovered. You know, and so it's like people need to know this information, and I'm going to do my best to make sure it's in these booklets so that people, I'm doing one in English and one in Spanish.
Wow.
Whenever I get finished with it, it's a task of a lifetime, but I'm determined to get it done like really soon.
Wow.
And another thing I like to tell people, you know, even though like I have it in me to be critical and judgmental, but I work on it all the time. And so I try to meet people where they are and be gentle, but it's constant work. It's not like it just comes all automatically to me. Sometimes I want to fight and throw down, but I fought so much that I'm just like, you know what? I just want to namaste my way through this conversation because I am tired of fighting. It's like, I've done the fights, but I'm just like, I'm tired of fighting. But yeah, I just try to tell people to, if they aren't moved enough to just go vegan right away based on what they've learned, to just try to eliminate an animal at a time, and work on achieving that. Because I tell people, you could have never ever told me I would be vegan. And doing this stuff for a living, caring about animals and empathy for like, this was not me. Like I could have never foreseen this lifestyle, this career, this energy, this feeling. Like if someone would have told me this 10 years ago, I'd have been like, yeah, there is no freaking way. So I'm like, if I can do this, there's no excuses.
Same. Same. It was my entire life. I was always the person saying, oh, I could never give up meat. I was like, oh, I tried to be vegetarian for like a week in 7th grade. And really, I did not actually try. I think that was just like a phase. I was trying to get attention. But but I was always saying I could never give up meat. I could never give up cheese or whatever it was. And I did not personally go vegan for the animals. It was like my own health and then the environment. And then I learned more about animals later on. So this conversation, I know I've said it a million times, but I'll say it again and again, is so important. All the points covered here. We need to get this education out there. And you both are just powerhouses. I'm so honored and privileged to have been able to share space with you, and the work that you're doing. There is so much that has to be done within our society, particularly within the US, around food deserts and inequities around food security and access to plant-based foods and all of it. But both of you are doing very crucial work in order to expand that and make that more available for all people. So I'm incredibly thankful for you both. I'm going to put all of your contact information and just, information about things we've talked about in the episode description. And if there are any listeners who are just feeling like they need to do something more, they want to get this education out there, then you can start by sharing this episode. Just share it with people in your circle and allow them to hear these things for themselves. And I think that's it. I'll stop my rant at that point. I know I'm biased, but I just love this conversation, and thank you both so much for the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I learned so much.
Me too.
Being on this call. So this was great.
Yeah, no, this was extremely valuable. And I'm so grateful to end the week with this conversation that feels so uplifting and actionable. I know that it wasn't all uplifting the whole time, but I am feeling uplifted now. Another thing that I would really recommend is reading the book Eating Animals by Jonathan Safran Foer. If you want a very unbiased, fact-based, but still beautifully written and storytelling type way of learning this information that is very well researched, I would read the book Eating Animals by Jonathan Safran Foer. And if you're particularly sensitive, just skip the chapter called Our New Sadism. And otherwise, really, it's not particularly disturbing. It's just very informative and powerful and beautifully written. And yeah, listen to this podcast, the rest of the episodes.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. I am excited to get together with you, Claudia, in person. You live near me. And then Gwenna, if I am ever in California or you're here, please look me up. I would love to get together with you as well.
Sounds good.
Well, have a wonderful night, the both of you. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you both so much.
All right. Nice meeting everyone.
Nice meeting you.
So great to meet you.
Right,
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.